All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of the SCRAPS project game design level design review. Um, Today we're gonna go to the second phase of the whole level design operation that we went through to produce the final result. A snippet of which you can see right here in this screenshot. But I will get to that in just a minute. Got a lot to cover today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so welcome to the Leviathan's Hybernia. This is the second month. So in the previous video, I showed you the volcano, that facility that I made, the rudimentary block mesh. The following month, we were told to take that same Scraps game and the different pieces that we'd used and designed in the original level, like my flickering lights and the puzzle mechanic that I introduced, where you use the buttons to move the column around, and other pieces. Take those and bring them into a team environment. So now we got a team of 5 individuals that are going to work together using all of the pieces that they've built, and we're going to assemble them together and design a new level from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the design process and introduce the team and all of the different things that we went through during this process. So this whole process, from introducing us to Scraps to building that first level, that took about a month. And from here till the final project or product also took about a month. So there's going to be some screenshots of the actual level, and they are going to look different than the actual final product. And I'll get to that later. But let's just start out here. As I've previously mentioned in many of my videos, I am Ashton Williams, or GMSpector. I'm a student of the game design program at Fullsail University. I have a real passion for gaming and the design of games, how games are put together, how their systems all work together, and how both world, if it's a video game, systems, whether it's a video game or a board game or a card game or whatever, and all of this just works together to give people a platform to forge relationships with each other. Whether it's a single player game where you play it and then you have something to go and talk to other people who play the same game about, or it's a multiplayer game that gets you engaging with other people. That's just something that I really, really like and appreciate and love about how games work, and that's part of why they're one of my favorite things to get into and why I'm so passionate about them. I was, for this month, as we were introduced to this team environment, I I was brought out to, or I was elected, so to speak, by the team to kind of orchestrate and facilitate things, and put in the role of team lead. I coordinated the meetings. I kind of kept everybody on task, helped out people troubleshoot things as they needed, kind of coordinated between people if we needed that. And it went pretty darn well. Had a really good team working with me this time. We really worked well together, and it was definitely a team that I would be more than eager to work with again in the future. Speaking of, the team consisted of, as I already talked about, myself, Tyler Roberts, Cameron Pena, Zachary Vargas, and Jason Porter was our team component, or our team makeup. And each of us had a different area and section of the level and different responsibilities, but at the conclusion of the first meeting, Tyler spoke up and was like, I think we should have a team lead, and he nominated me for that position. But then after that, as meetings progressed and we got into the planning phase, we were able to relocate jobs to specific areas of responsibility to all of the other team members. And we've already talked about in the previous video what the SCRAPS project was. Now this is important to go hit again, because this was the base foundation for how and what we were going to design this level to be. So what we did was we were given SCRAPS. Now, SCRAPS, as I mentioned in the previous video, is a action-adventure, first-person shooter game that is set in a post-apocalyptic world. And so that right there tells you a lot about the different design elements that are going to be going into this game. You know, first person, right? That means that it's not going to be side view or top down or it's first-person shooter game. And in first-person shooting level design, you can need to use different elements and aspects of player guidance than you would in, for example, a top-down sort of a game. But I'll get into all of that later. So, post-apocalyptic, right? There we have the vibe and the feel and the setting of what's going on in the world, what kind of a feel we want to have, right? Something destroyed. The world is kind of crumbling, it's falling apart, so we don't want things to be pristine or in good condition, right? We're kind of trying to make a mess, essentially. And so within that, we got together and we analyzed the different pieces of different mechanics and stuff that we had, different tools. And what we ended up deciding was as a team, we liked the rising lava level that I had in my volcano level. We also liked my puzzles. And so we wanted to use that as kind of a present mechanic. And we were thinking about somebody else had a moving platform. Somebody else had a conveyor belt that didn't actually end up making an appearance, but it was slated to. We had another guy, Cameron, had a really good artifact that we were really trying to implement, but we didn't have quite the time, and we were having some bugs and issues with it, so we ended up having to remove that. But what we ended up building was this. Leviathan's Hybernia. That was a name coined by Tyler Roberts, which was very excellently done. Has a very nice feel to it. Very ominous. So the Hybernia is a abandoned military oil facility. And at this facility, the player shows up. It's a coastal facility, and the player starts off having arrived on a boat in the middle of a very treacherous bay. And the idea is that the BAST recently upgraded their sensor package, and they were starting to pick up energy readings from this location, and they want the scrapper, which is the player, to go and investigate and, if possible, recover the source of these energy readings and bring it back to the BAST so that the BAST can benefit from it. Now, this is the original layout of the map. So right here, this is that starting area. So this is the front starting area. We were gonna have a side area with some collectibles over here, The player's gonna start here, and then they're gonna take an elevator down into a security room. That security room is going to lead into a garage, which will fork in four different directions. One will go into the refinery. Another will go into the maintenance room or area. Another will head into the offices and meeting areas and the armory. And the third will end up going into the barracks and mess hall. You'll notice also off to the security room here, we've got security control room and then some holding cells back off here. And then we've got the refinery, and the refinery has a basement, a main floor, a top floor, and then there are, above that top floor, there are catwalks. This is going to be a large, huge, open room with just multiple tiers, and then this great big tank off to the side here, just kind of a big window looking out into this underground oil tank. And then over here we've got a whole bunch of stuff happening, and then there's a escape tunnel, a vehicle waiting up at the end of the escape tunnel that will zoom the player across the end of the level. So what the idea behind this was that as the player comes through this, their objective is to acquire a power core. That's that energy readings, and when the player removes the power core, similar to the way that things worked in the volcano level, where everything goes into emergency power mode, and all the alarms start going off, the lava level starts rising, right? And the volcano is going to erupt. Well, with this, we converted from lava into oil, and we're going to have the place flood with oil. And the oil is going to drown the player if it catches up to the player. And so this is the original layout, level layout. The player comes down here, goes into the security room. There's going to be some combat here in the security control, and there's going to be a key that the player is going to pick up. And that key will open the door that goes between the garage and this conference room, right? And so with that door open, with that key, the player is going to be able to go through here and then explore all of these rooms, and is going to pick up a key in the base commander's office that will unlock the barracks or the mess hall, right? It'll be this door right here. And then the player will be able to go through here, and in either of these locations, pick up a key that will open up the maintenance room. There's some loot and some combat in here as well. Player comes back out and enters the maintenance chamber. In the maintenance chamber, the player was going to have to solve a little bit of a puzzle where they end up dropping one of these batteries, the artifact, as it was titled initially, the object created by Cameron, that essentially, when slotted onto a certain type of generator, allowed it to trigger and activate objects. But we were going to acquire this battery by solving a little puzzle in that maintenance room over there. And from the maintenance room, there was going to be connections to the catwalk, the main floor, and the basement floor of the actual refinery itself. In the refinery, we were going to have introductory practice and mastery level of the column shifting puzzle, and some combat. And the player was going to, as they do that, the oil level is just going to start rising, and the place is going to start filling up with oil. And then they're going to solve the mastery level, just like in the volcano level. And all of a sudden, the oil level is just going to start rising, and they're going to have to run across the catwalks, and then get to the escape tunnel, jump on the vehicle, zoom across the end of the level, and that was where we were going to call it. Now, this is the original level layout. There was a lot of work and changes and alterations that went into this after the fact. And the final result ended up very different from this. But you can see, I was talking earlier about separating out different roles. We looked at each of our availability. And some of us had to work, some of us had other things going on, and so we tried to divvy up the areas based on approximated workload. Tyler took responsibility for the opening area, the elevator, and the security area. And he ended up adopting the garage, because that also changed a little bit. Jason took control over the barracks and was responsible for setting all of that up. Zach took over the office areas. Cameron took maintenance and the escape tunnel, getting the vehicle set up, and the end of the level. And I took the more difficult area of the refinery. Just because of its size and complexity, the refinery was going to take the most amount of work. But we kind of separated and divvied it up, and we did it with the understanding that if one of us would get stuck, we would all be able to pitch in and help out, and pick up some slack. So, I was responsible for the addition of a lot of different mechanics and features of this level. I designed in the volcano level the column puzzle, and I modified the parameters of it. I actually had to rebuild entire sections of the code that did not survive the import. And I had to do a lot more bug fixing on it, a lot more troubleshooting, before I could actually get these puzzles to start working again. But I managed to get that done. So I brought the column puzzle in. I also brought in the rising oil level, which is I had to completely rebuild from the original lava. Because it was working on different principles, and I wanted it to be smoother than the lava level was. The lava level was a bit janked up, and I wanted the oil level to trigger a bit more smoothly and a bit differently, so that it didn't trigger whenever the player moved a column anymore. And so I had to end up rewriting all of that code, and making it a little bit smoother. more smooth. But I'll go into that in the next video. I also used some of the alarm systems. As you can see, these are updated versions of the same alarms that were in the volcano. And you can also see that these are the same gates that have just evolved, the security gates. They just kind of evolved into something more polished and more universally plug and play. We had to do a lot of debugging and troubleshooting with those because they were either, sometimes they would move just like barely and then the player couldn't even get through. Sometimes the player would have to crouch to get under them, and other times the door gates just disappeared into the ceiling. So I had to do some bug shooting and fixing on that. I, again, was responsible for the design of the refinery. I put up all of these tanks, and I tried to make it feel like an industrial sort of an environment, both in auditory sound. I wanted kind of a dim lighting. I wanted it to feel cluttered, but not be too super distracting for the player. To try and figure out what way they're supposed to go. And so I was directly responsible for getting the refinery all squared away and set up. I also did some work in the maintenance area. Cameron had some stuff come up at the last minute, and so we came in and I had to replace all of the walls that he used with a different mesh, and make a couple of aesthetic polishes that he was unable to get to due to life, which happens. So I messed around in the maintenance area along with Zach. Zach and I kind of finished and wrapped that up. I worked with Tyler to kind of play around with the design of the water and the rocks beneath the water, and kind of playing with the textures, the materials. Tyler, in a stroke of genius, set the time to night and just made it look absolutely amazing. For most of the design process, we were working on then building this in the daytime, but setting it at night just made it so much better. It was a really beautiful idea on his part. I also helped Cameron out with the above ground area. We had some bugs that needed to be fixed, which I'll get to in just a minute, but I had to move a bunch of stuff around, and so it ended up being a little different than the way that he had initially had it. But most of it ended up being the same and being his original work. I didn't really do a whole lot over there, except for just move things sideways. So I brought a bunch of visual effects to the game as well. Just in this screenshot here, you can see this great big tank and pump object. I whipped that together. You see particle effects for oil coming up out of this pipe here. I updated and tried to fix the alarms to make them a little bit more realistic and believable. I brought in, you can see these catwalks. They look very similar to the ones that were used in the volcano, but there's some slight differences. And these were also actually used, or the pieces and components of them were used to, excuse me. Components of them were used to make the docks out front. And the pump complex object here was also used out front. So a lot of these different design and aesthetics I ended up bringing in and contributing to the project. Now, I also did a bunch of perforce troubleshooting. So we kept having a lot of issues regarding whenever we would try and open up the project, it would just crash. And so I would have to go in and try and find where the problem was and what file was breaking the game, what object, and then I'd have to remove it in Perforce. And then as time kind of went on, I was able to show the team how to do that. Now, Perforce, for those of you that don't know, Perforce is a software that is designed to, it's like a cloud share, where you can upload a project to the cloud, but you can check out individual files. So it allows multiple game designers on multiple computers to be modifying pieces of the overall entire project together. And then we have to submit, once we do all of our modifications, we save it to our computer, and then we submit it to the cloud, and then it will just overwrite the existing file on the cloud with the new updated stuff. But if multiple people have the same file checked out, or if some people don't update to the latest version of things, or however the case is, it can really bug out. And so we had a lot of issues with Perforce not letting us save our project, or having Perforce decide that, well, Perforce wasn't deciding, but Unreal Engine would just crash on us, so we'd have to go in and try and figure out what exactly happened. There were several instances where we had to completely delete the entire project from the cloud, and have one of our team members who had a working version go in and re-upload their version of the project that they had. And so I think at one point we lost about 80 hours worth of work. That's I think that's actually an exaggeration. There were 3 of us. Yeah, so it wasn't 80 hours. It was about 30 hours total of man work. And that set us back, but we ended up getting there in the end, and this was before we really understood how the undo function worked and how to make it actually function on Perforce. But as a result of the playtesting, I learned how to actually do that properly. So we got that all fixed and figured out, but there was a good amount of time that was dedicated to this project that was just troubleshooting the Perforce server so that we could all get back to work. So this is actually a snapshot of what the coding looks like in Unreal Engine, and kind of how it works. It's visual based, and it kind of works like a flowchart. But another thing that took a lot of time of my time that I contributed to the project was going through all of the code and all of the flowcharts and making sure that everything was working properly, and trying to figure out why things weren't working the way that they were supposed to. This is actually a snapshot, I believe, of the oil level as it rises, and how all of that works, which took quite a while for me to get it. Excuse me. It took me quite a while to get it situated the way that I needed it to, in order to work, where I can customize the rate at which it rises, and or not the weight, the speed with which it rises, and how high it rises during each of its phases. I made this before I really knew how state machines worked. And ironically, that was covered in the next class after this. So I had to kind of figure out how to do it from scratch, and it works. It just, I could write this code a lot more efficiently now than I did at the time. But because of that inefficiency, there was a lot of bugs, there was a lot of issues that I had to work through with this one. I also helped some people code some of the doors and fix up some of their other blueprints. Just kind of consulting with everybody and helping out. Now, we had also never used world partition in Unreal Engine, so I don't know. For those of you that don't know what world partition is, oftentimes in open world games, or just games in general, the world is partitioned off into sections so that it makes it easier on the processing power of the computer that is running it. So I don't know if you say, let's say you're playing a game, and sometimes you'll notice that as you hit a certain point, and then you can see in the distance, right, another 100 or so feet renders in, and now you can see more trees and stuff. And that's part of the world partition. Is that so each section is a location volume. Now, those location volumes make it so that multiple game designers can work on the same project at the same time. So as you can see here in this screenshot, right? We've got above ground section, we've got a refinery section, barrack and mess 2, office and conference, front gate right, front gate center, and front gate left, right? We got all these different location volumes, right? And these location volumes don't only, sometimes they work in-game from a player's perspective, like I was illustrating a minute ago, you know, where it renders another whole chunk of trees at a time. But also in Unreal Engine and a lot of other game engines, these are actually represented by the ability for game designers to only load in part of the whole world at a time. So, like, for example, this larger block here, that box right there, that is the refinery. Or it would be. If I clicked on this box and then right-clicked on it and then hit load volume, it would load in the refinery, and the refinery would appear in that box. And so I would be able to work on all of the objects inside that refinery box while other people are working on the other areas, so that we didn't end up modifying the same the same objects. And it kind of just helped us partition each area that we're working on. So I spent most of my time in the refinery with just the refinery section loaded in, and so everybody else was able to work in the other areas. And so whenever we would submit to Perforce, instead of multiple people submitting the same files over and over and over again on top of it, it was just modifying the files in our area that we messed with. But the location volumes ended up causing us all kinds of issues because I set them up, and I set them up incorrectly. So for some reason that we never quite were able to fully understand, we would load up one of the volumes, and it would try and load up the rest of the volumes, and so, or parts of them at least. And so I had to go in and do a lot of reworking with the location volumes and try and deal with Unreal crashing all the time, and so I had to fix all of that. There were a couple of times where I had to delete the start and end volumes, the level start and level end volumes, in Perforce instead of in the actual project, because whenever we would load in the level start or level end area volumes, it would just crash the entire game. So I had to kind of work around that and get that all figured out. So I did a lot of that in this. It was a great project. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things. This is a in-editor view of the Hybernia with everything loaded in. It was a little bit more difficult than I originally thought it would be to work in a team during level design. It was more difficult in that I wasn't able to directly change or be in control of all of the little design elements, which I was in the original volcano level. But I found that having more people to bounce ideas off of, and to have them bounce ideas off of me, and being able to consult like that, we were able to construct the original base version of the Leviathan's Hybernia in 3 days. The Hybernia is a much bigger level than the volcano was. There's a lot more to it. It's a lot smoother. It's a lot better designed. But it's also, well, I mean, I kind of just said it. It's better. It's a lot better. And we were able to do in 3 days what it took us 2 months really to accomplish. Notice in the volcano level, we were still in the block mesh phase. You know, we were block meshing still when we finished that level. The Hybernia, by the time those 3 days were over, which were some of the hardest 3 days of my schooling, I'll be honest. Very intense. We ended up being a little bit late on it. Not much, but just a little bit. Couple of hours. But those 3 days, we went from A to Z block meshing. And so, with 5 people doing 3 days worth of work, we ended up completing to a much greater degree of success and quality the work that one of us did in a month, you know? And so it was really kind of eye-opening to be able to see how quickly a group of guys can just pull all of this together. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of really good experience. So after we kind of got those 3 days, we got our block mesh done. We then had to polish it up, play test it, send it to other classmates to play test some of our other classmates' levels, and then take that feedback and make improvements. And we did that cycle twice. And then between those 2 cycles, we did the first one, and then we polished the level up a little bit more based on that feedback. And then we also went and we found more actual more finalized assets. The textures, the meshes, a bunch of the things like that. We just went and acquired more actual textures. We phased out the grid. We kind of just polished it up so it actually looked like a level. And then after that, we sent it back out and did another round of playtesting. But After that round of playtesting, we had to make a presentation. This is talk that I've been going on with you guys is very similar to that presentation. The one I'm giving right now is more in depth. But we never really had to modify that project any further from after we got that secondary feedback. So after that second month concluded, I have been working on it some more. That second month concluded almost a little over 2.5 weeks ago. And so in that 2.5 weeks, I kept working. And I made a lot of modifications. And I retextured a bunch of things. I redid the lighting. I moved some of the objects around in a couple of different areas. And so I will get into, in the next episode, I will start out with a actual playthrough of the Hybernia. And then I will analyze and go over and we'll watch it again, and I'll point out some of the different aspects and elements as we watch it. And then after that, I'll open it up in the actual editor, and I'll show you guys some of the blueprint and some of the different codes and kind of walk you through some of the areas. But for now, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.